So, Tri-City Sports Now. I am Marky Bilson, joined here by the Trooper, Andy Slagle. Steve Forbes is a few minutes away. But I gave a teaser on something that was just plain huge, didn't I, here, Andy? Who was going to be on the cover of the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue? I think it's a nice selection here. We've got this Danielle Harrington. And Danielle, I'm going to, here, we're showing it now to Andy for his approval. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, you have to do this. This is why, if you are listening on AM 1420, this is why you've got to like our Facebook page on AM 1420, the AM 1420 Facebook page, because then we have the video and we actually put this stuff up. But I've got a black and white here of Danielle Harrington. And here we are. Something right there. So obviously a very beautiful woman. She is the third African American who will be on the cover of the swimsuit issue. Beyonce, remember that, in 2007, and Tyra Banks in a previous generation in 96 and 97. So the swimsuit issue has been around since 64. You ever see those early?
I've never seen 64 models.
You've never seen that?
No.
The swimsuits are not as revealing back then as they are right now. Who's your favorite Sports Illustrated swimsuit
I
model?
couldn't tell you. I've never really followed the swimsuit edition. I never really got into that with the swimsuit edition. I'd have to think with the favorite.
I would probably say, and this goes back to when you're sort of just learning what girls are, okay, in that regard. Carol Alt, who goes way back to 1981 and was once married to Ron Greschner, the former New York Ranger. Greschner, I gotta learn what he's doing.
That's 4 years before I was born.
Well, it's a picture you ought to take a look at. Trust me on this. Paulina Porizkova, also from that era, who married Rick Ocasek, is just still to this day. You wouldn't think that she had aged one bit. And the thing about Carol Alt was that, like I said, she married Ron Greschner. When that marriage broke up, Ron Greschner, I got to take whatever he's taken, married Kim Alexis. Say what you will, anyway, right there. And you thought Tom Brady, Ron Greschner was Tom Brady in that regard before Tom Brady was Tom Brady. Trust me on that. Hey, I got something else here to tell you about the Florida. Who do you think here, Andy Slagle, is the face of Florida football?
Tim Tebow.
What about Steve Spurrier? That's who I would say.
Yeah, Steve Spurrier.
Okay, modern day Tim Tebow, historically Steve Spurrier. All right? The Gators are saying that they have hired the former face of Florida football. They say it's Vernell Brown. Do you remember Vernell Brown?
Couldn't tell you that, no.
Yeah. Okay, this is the thing. And I'm using this as an example, Andy, of sometimes college publicists tend to be propaganda artists. When you start taking Vernell Brown over a Tebow or a Spurrier or an Emmitt Smith or whoever for that matter, I mean a Charlie Pell, then you're, out there. Used to play defensive back, and he is returning as the director of player development, which basically means it's a non-position.
Well, when you have to put the punt returns and yards in there to try to convince the Florida people that this is the face of Florida football, there's problems.
I would imagine that if we were having contemporary face of Florida football, I would think it might be Dan Mullen, perhaps Felipe Franks. But anyway, saying I'm going back to the swamp. New coach Dan Mullen, late of Mississippi State, expressed his desire to have more former players back involved in the program. That's fantastic. One of my 18 rules of sports. You take care of your legends. That's why I think that Derek Jeter this year and maybe for the foreseeable future is going to have some problems in Florida, but down in Miami. But he says that Brown was a pivotal member in helping turn around Florida football coming out of the Ron Zook years. I always thought that Urban Meyer and Tim Tebow had more to do with that than Vernell Brown, to tell you the truth. But Meyer called him the heart and soul of the team, which makes him sound like a 220 hitting shortstop, to be brutally honest with you. And was named the face of Florida football by Urban Meyer in 2006, which means that Urban Meyer is a propagandist. And as you said, then the press release returns. He had 59 punt returns for almost 500 yards and started the face of Florida football. This is a team that's won, 3 national championships over the last 8? He started 11 games.
Yeah, well.
I thought Emmitt Smith started a few more than that, to be honest with you, myself. Anyway, Steve Forbes is coming up here at 1 o'clock talking about last night's game and the future of ETSU basketball, which we were out. Speaking of ex-Florida Gators, Jim McElwain. Now, have you heard this, that he is working in Michigan, might be taking him on as a receivers coach. There's some discussion about that. Question here, what is your thought right now of Jim Harbaugh's job at Michigan so far? What is your thought on Jim Harbaugh as a coach?
Jim Harbaugh is a very interesting coach. He, I think he's having some success, but when you're losing to the Michigan States, it's kind of like if you're Tennessee. You can't beat Bama, you can't beat Florida. You're gonna end up eventually losing your job.
The thing is that it's been very rare over the history of Tennessee football that they've beaten Florida and beaten Alabama.
Oh, yeah.
I know there was the 7-year period there in the late 90s, early 2000s, but since then, and certainly historically against Florida since they went to divisions, there haven't been that many times where Tennessee has beaten Florida or Alabama.
It's surprising to me that Jim Harbaugh can't get a solid quarterback in there.
Got Shea Patterson transfer from Ole Miss.
Yeah. Hopefully he, that will. But so far he hasn't done. He's done well recruiting and stuff like that. But the quarterback play for Michigan, from what I've seen, has not been great. Maybe if but. I do think that he's an excellent coach. I think that he'll probably end up back in the NFL again. If I did see they were people talking about giving him a lifetime contract, and some of the Michigan fans was upset about that.
I would be upset about that if I was honest to goodness, because although I think that dominant program, Tennessee is suffering a little through this because of TV money in there now and the SEC and the Big Ten networks. The gap between even, say, let's use SEC or Big Ten as many teams, 14-1, even with the dominance of some programs like Alabama, is not what it was because of the TV money. And so a Michigan, which used to be able to make and, develop their program so much, they were drawing 115,000 people into the games. I mean, how can you not make money with that? They'll pay whatever price you put on the ticket, for crying out loud. Less so now. Now even, and just about anybody, it seems like Maryland or Rutgers, who they seem to want to bring in just to beat all the time, are able to have that competition because the money is in there now with the TV. And what you draw in terms of attendance, while it does make Tennessee one of the most profitable programs, and I'm sure Michigan as well, not so much. Anyway, point here that I'm trying to make, you mentioned the quarterbacks, and we'll have to see what Shea Patterson does after transferring from Ole Miss. But I've always thought Harbaugh was very overrated, as a matter of fact. I think that he opened up, shall we go off the deep end and say the death of football, when he benched Alex Smith for Colin Kaepernick.
Yeah.
I didn't think at the time that was a good move, and it was a flash-in-the-pan quarterback over someone who now the Washington Redskins think at the age of 34 is going to be your savior, and some NFL scout thought he was too, because they drafted him number 1 overall. And this was at a time when it looked like Smith, after his rocky start, finally had turned it around. Well, that move essentially sent him to Michigan, where he's now finding out it's not like it was when he was there with Bo Schembechler, when it was the Big 2 and the Little 8. And even back in those days, by the way, Andy, I don't know if you remember this, Lorenzo White would actually take Michigan State to the Rose Bowl on a season or two. Actually, one season. It was 87. I think that he's a bit of an overrated coach, to tell you the truth. I know that he's got the reputation, but I think it's falling. in my opinion here, Andy.
He's an interesting individual. If you've ever, listened to some of his interviews and stuff like that, the Big Ten has a lot of good coaching.
I mean, you've got Franklin up there now, and you've got Antonio, Urban Meyer, and one of the things about Ohio State is that they have the biggest budget in all of college athletics. The biggest budget. And when you have that, Andy, you're going to be bound to win.
Yeah.
And all this. And that's actually one of the things where they talk about Tennessee being so profitable. And I look at that as the only reason why we could really think of Tennessee football in the future as being a dominant program again, unless something through the cards falls through them like it did in the 90s. Because I say, if you're making all that money, then you're going to benefit if the players are ever paid. Now this is where you can have your advantage again. As it stands right now, although they are more profitable, now that there is more money for everybody, as we're seeing now, even the Vanderbilts can beat at least Tennessee. Perhaps still a bit much for the Floridas and the Georgias and the Alabamas. Hey, I want to tell everybody this. J. Ray's Heating and Air in Irwin. From installation and maintenance and repair for your heating and air, locally owned and insured, call Jape Keplinger, 948-8016 for your free estimate. If somebody happens to be listening in North Carolina here, I happen to think they know the area code, but what is it there, Andy?
423.
And then it's 948-8016. What's that again?
423.
948-8016. Your free estimate for J. Ray's Heating and Air. They're in Irwin. Free estimate. Call them up wherever you are. I mean, come on. Irwin is not far away from where you're listening in. And if you missed the number, well, then why don't you just go to the video section of Tri-City Sports Now radio station, 1420 NBC Sports Radio Tri-Cities. We archive it. You'll be able to find it on the Facebook page then what the number was. I'm going to be calling up Steve Forbes in just a minute or two. Steve Forbes suffered one of the worst losses, I think, probably of his coaching career. But you know what? When you're still in first place by a game and you talk about how bad the loss was, things can't be all that bad. Yes, Steve Forbes, ETSU head basketball coach, will join me after this on Tri-City Sports Now.
WENB Irwin, 1420 NBC Sports Radio.